Please, a warm welcome to Shruti Balasa.
So, good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. This is my first time in LARACON Europe as an attendee and as a speaker. So, I'm super excited. For the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk about how best you can customize Tailwind CSS. I think this is the first front-end talk since yesterday morning. I hope it's a good change. I'm Shruti Balasa, a full-stack web developer and a tech educator from India. I create courses on LinkedIn Learning and LARACASTs. I write some ebooks. I have a YouTube channel. So I tried different channels to talk about Tailwind CSS and Laravel, but I'm a huge fan of Tailwind CSS. So if you don't agree that it's the best framework, then we can't be friends. Sorry. So if you have, used Tailwind CSS regularly, then you might have come across one of my videos on YouTube, or probably stumbled upon my Twitter profile because I keep posting some Tailwind tips, or you might have found me on the homepage of the official Tailwind CSS website. If not, I'll work harder this year. You'll see me somewhere. So back to the talk. Why do I believe that Tailwind CSS is so amazing? It's because it has customization built into it. Like, it's built keeping customization in mind, unlike a few frameworks we've used before. So every single thing in Tailwind is customizable. You don't have to think that this is what it is. My project is not fit for Tailwind, or Tailwind is not fit for my project, because you can see all these websites here, like Lemon Squeezy, and The Verge, which is a magazine, online magazine, and then Shopify. So many such websites. All of them look really different. They all are built using Tailwind. And you can find a few more on Showcase of the Tailwind website. So I'm sure you've also come across a lot of other websites which are built with Tailwind. So a lot is possible. There's so much that you can do to make Tailwind your own framework. We all know that there's so much that is possible. So today, I'm not going to be talking about the possibilities or what's possible. Instead, I chose to talk about what's best for you, your project, and your team. So I'm not talking about to what extent you can go, but I'm going to be talking about a few guidelines or some thumb rules or some general things you can keep in mind so that you can make your life so easy. So the first question that comes is, where do we customize Tailwind CSS? So if you are using Tailwind, you must know that you can customize Tailwind CSS mostly in two places, right? One is in the input style sheet. That's where you put the Tailwind directives and everything. And another place that you can do is the Tailwind config file in JavaScript. So the first way is using CSS. The second way is using JavaScript. But there are some things you can only do in CSS, like probably you're importing some fonts, or you're using Google Fonts. You can't include that in the config file. You have to do it using CSS. And at the same time, there are some things you can only do using JavaScript. Like you want to import all the colors from your design system, your design tokens, include some plugins. Those are the things which are meant for the JavaScript. But of course, these things are obvious. There's probably only one way to do it. It's in the documentation. There's no confusion. But there are a lot of other things that can go in both the places, and whether to do it or not, where to do it, these are the questions. Some of them I try to solve right now. Yeah, so I'm not going to say these are the rules that you have to follow. I wouldn't even say best practices. It might work for some. In my opinion, it works for a large amount of people. There are some points I've picked up from the documentation, some from Adam Wathan's tweets maybe, and some from my own experience. So I hope it helps you. Coming to the first rule. Whenever possible, just add it in HTML in your markup, right? So let's look at some examples. Now, let's say you want to add some global styles to your entire website, right? Maybe a background color, some set of font sizes, or something that is for either you add it in your, to the entire HTML, right? You can do it this way. That is, you can go to your input style sheet. In your base layer, you can add your styles in CSS to your body. That's something that's possible. Or if you want to, you can complicate it a little more and use the add base plugin function and add it so. It looks even more fancy and more professional, maybe, I don't know. But I would suggest don't do it either way. Just add it in HTML like this. Yes, the very first look of it feels like, oh, this feels like inline styles. It feels dirty. It's not probably the best way. It might feel hacky, all of that. But think about it. How many body tags do you have in your entire document? Just one. So this is there in just one place, right? And the moment you look at it, you know that these are the styles associated with body. Just like every other element in the entire document. The styles are right next to the element. That's what we want. So why separate the body styles from it and add it either in HTML or in CSS or in the config file? You can simply add it in HTML this way. This is the best practice. It's actually listed in the docs as well. So next. Very long class names, whatever Tailwind is totally famous for. So you do come across page sections like this, which are probably full screen sections, which has some background gradient, some padding, some responsive styles. Too much happening here. I know you've seen 3 to 4 times longer class names than this, but I just picked one for example. Now, it's very tempting to abstract all of this. You have a few sections that are very similar in the page, right? Very tempting to abstract all of this. And since there is this apply directive anyway, let's just use apply and put all of that, call it section full screen or something, and then use it in the section. Yeah. HTML looks neat, of course, but think about what you're doing. The whole point of using Tailwind is lost. You're thinking of class names, you're switching files, and there are a few more problems. Of course, since we added this in the components layer, we will be able to override it with utility classes. So if you had a different font weight, you can say font thin, you can say text XL, and it works. So it feels good, right? But what if you want to add BG white? If you notice, we've had a gradient background, right? So which means this uses the property background image, and you will not be able to override that with the property background color, which is BG image. So this will not work. So what do? Then you probably create another section called section full screen gradient or section full screen plain background, and it just goes on getting more complicated, right? So best thing is to leave it as it is. Yes, it looks cluttered. If it bothers you so much, there are plugins to hide it called inline fold plugin in VS Code. You can use those so you won't be able to see the class names while you're coding. Only when you hover, you'll see the class names. But trust me, it's going to get more maintainable if you do it this way. So we come to the second rule, which is if it's easier to do it in CSS, please do it in CSS and not in JavaScript. Let's look at some examples. So these were body styles that I spoke about that applies to the entire document. But what if you want to add some base styles to your basic elements like headings or paragraphs, image, anchor tags? These are general styles, and these elements are all over the place. You want to consolidate the styles and add something like pre-flight, but your own defaults. So when that is the case, like I spoke about the add base plugin function, you can do this. You can add your styles for heading, paragraph, and all of those here. But imagine you have about at least 40 elements with, at least 10 elements with 4 styles each, 4 rules. This will quickly get too long, and the whole point of config file might be lost. Like there are certain things you're looking in a configuration. This might not be one of them. And also, it's difficult to add responsive styles. It doesn't look like CSS at all anymore. The syntax gets so difficult. Even when you want to add hover and focus styles, it's going to get complex. So simply just put CSS where it belongs in the CSS file. It looks more, I don't know, it looks the way it should look, and it's easier to maintain as well. We've all seen long style sheets, so that's okay. And we know that all the base styles are in the base layer in the style sheet. Yes, even with, when it comes to keyframes, it is okay if you just have one keyframe in your entire project. It's good to add it right here in the config file, along with the animation maybe. But if you have too many of them, it's better to add them in CSS, one below the other. Easier to write. This CSS and JS syntax is crazy. But that brings me to the next point, which is whatever you do, whichever way you choose, it's entirely up to you, but please stick to one way. Don't, if you are using the components layer and utilities layer in input style sheet, if you're adding all your utilities and components here, please add all of them here. Or if you're using JavaScript and you're using the methods add components and add utilities, add all your components and utilities here. Don't sprinkle some of them there, some of them here. Yeah, of course, it seems obvious, like who would do that? But once your project starts getting long, somebody might find it very easy to add it in CSS quickly. It's working, so why bother? But then you're searching in two different files for what you need. Somebody else might not imagine that it's in the other file. So whatever you do, please stick to one way and make sure everybody knows what that is. And yeah, this is really important. Just because you can, don't configure everything. It's possible to do so much, but that doesn't mean you should. Some good examples, we'll come to that. So there is the spacing scale in Tailwind CSS. You must be aware of it if you're using it. This is what it is. I know it's a little small to read, but all of you should be aware of that. So when you say H4, it's H1 rem, or you multiply it by 4, it's 16 pixels. So that is the scale that is followed. Whatever number you use, if you want to calculate rems, you divide by 4, calculate by pixels, multiply by 4. Don't ask me why they chose this. I don't know. But this is the default spacing and sizing scale in Tailwind. As you can see, some numbers are missing here, like 13 is missing, 15, 17, 18, 19. That is by design, because you might not really need a value called 3.75 rem. So you can add it if you really need. So if you really need those numbers, you can extend the existing theme. So you're not changing much, you're just adding new things that you need, which is a must. You should do that if you're using it a lot. Otherwise, arbitrary values are fine. So let's say you can extend the spacing scale. This is good. But do you really want to replace the entire spacing scale? So I have seen this in production in one of the websites, which is there in Tailwind Showcase itself. So they have defined a spacing scale which directly relates to pixels. You can do that. But just imagine you're working with it, all that is good. You probably hire a senior developer who's been working with Tailwind for a lot of years. It's going to be so difficult for that person to adapt to this new spacing scale, right? And then you can't go about changing it in every place. Or imagine a new developer, they start learning this in your project, and then they move out. It's going to be so difficult. So I don't think it's so much of a problem to use the existing default. Use it, everybody is using it. It feels more normal. The second one being pre-flight. So Tailwind adds some very basic styles, something like normalized CSS. So it sets a few defaults for images, for links, and so many other things. For example, the display property for image is set to block, which is otherwise inline. And then every single element in Tailwind has a border. You don't see it because the width is set to 0. That's why the moment you simply add a border 1 or a border or a border 2 class, you're able to see a border immediately for your forms, form inputs, and things like that. It's there because it makes it easy. I would recommend not changing these defaults unless it's really affecting you a lot. The third one is responsive breakpoints. This is the default responsive breakpoints that Tailwind has. 5 screens, which is I think they have thought through this, and you'll see this commonly in most of the CSS style sheets. So unless it's really necessary for you, for example, I use another breakpoint, which is excess breakpoint. So I extend the existing screens. I add an extra small one to target even smaller devices. This is great. You can add a smaller one. You can add larger ones. You can probably even tweak the numbers a little bit. But try not to change the names and make it mobile, desktop, or large, small, something like that. It's just because you can, I feel that you shouldn't do that. So now we come to one of the final things that I'd love to talk about. Till now, I spoke about what are the things you shouldn't do. Mostly they were don'ts. Don't do this, don't do that. But right now, the last point is leverage the framework. There's so much power that Tailwind gives to make it your own, not in the ways that we spoke before, but you can create your own plugins. You're not limited to using the ones Tailwind has, utility classes, component classes, and so on. If it's needed for your project, you can create it only for your project. Or if you come up with a great idea, you can even publish it, make it open source. It's really good. So right now, we're going to create a dynamic component, which is, the use case is very common. So let's say you have a user interface where you have this avatar of a person, and this appears in multiple places, like in the top nav bar or even in the sidebar. Most of the styles are similar. They have rounded corners, or maybe if not circle, they'll have squarish, whatever it is. Most of the styles will be common if they have a border or a shadow or anything. So the only thing that's changing is the size. Right? So if you do this in CSS, this is probably what you'd do. You'd go to the components layer, create a class called avatar, if you want to extract the component, that is. And then you would give it a width and a height, and then border radius and shadow. And then you take this class, and in your markup, you'll say image class avatar, and you have it. So if you want a smaller one or a larger one, probably what you do is you define another class called avatar SM and override the sizes. Or if you want something larger, you do the same thing. You override the sizes. And then what you can do is you can add another class called avatar SM to have a smaller one, or avatar LG and have a larger one. But it can get better. This is just one way, probably how we've been doing all this while. But instead of using two class names, how would it be if you could just say avatar, and the way you see with other Tailwind utility classes, let's say you have these options, avatar SM, LG, and XL. It's easier for your developers. They know what to put where. They don't have to think about what width or height should it be, or they don't have to check back. It's available, it's more consistent. So let's see how we can create this component, dynamic component. We head over to our config file, and this is the default minimal config file there is. The first thing we do, even before we add our plugin, is we define our own key in the theme, and we call it avatar size, something like that. You can call it really anything that you want. And the sizes that we want are probably SM, LG, and XL, right? This is the width and the height of the avatar that you need. This is the one that's changing, so that's what you define. And the ones that are common is what we'll add in the plugin function. So if we first import the plugin function at the top, tailwindcss/plugin, and then within the plugins array, we call the plugin function, which takes in a single object, and that can be deconstructed into multiple plugin functions, utility functions like match components, add base, all of those that you've seen. So match components is the function that we're going to use now. Because avatar is not a utility class. If it was a single, let's say a single style, then it would be a utility class, a single property. But this is a component. So we're not using match utilities. We're going to use match components instead. And we call the match components function with two arguments. The first one being the class name that you want to call it. We would want the prefix to be avatar, followed by the size, right? And then you call the anonymous function with the value. then this value will see where it comes from, but the width and height are assigned to that value. And then we have the general styles, whatever else, probably border or shadow, whatever styles that you need, general ones. And then the second argument will have the values. Now this can be picked from the theme that you defined before, which is avatar size. So now if you want to change the size of your components, you can simply do it in one place. If you want the smaller one to be even smaller, maybe by 0.5 rem or something, you can simply go back to the keys that you defined, and you can change it there. You can add an additional one, extra large or something you need. You can do that. And then just like that, automatically, you will have this ready. So you can use your avatar component, your own component with all the different sizes that you want. Now, something like this can be created with, there are so many such utilities, dynamic utilities that you can create. You can use the existing theme values from Tailwind. Say, for example, you want a fancy underline border, which is very unique. You can't do that directly using the Tailwind utility classes. You can create a dynamic utility class for that. Use the colors which you have defined, or use the Tailwind colors and create one for yourself. So there's a lot that you can do. I would encourage you to explore those options. So what are the benefits of creating your own component? The first one is reduces the number of classes, like you just saw, right? We don't have to use 2 classes, avatar, avatar SM, or even if you're not creating a component class, since the size varies, you might use width so-and-so, height so-and-so, or because of the new class, we do have a size class now, which creates a square box, so you might say size, 8 or something like that. But all that is avoided. You can use a single class. And there is consistency, like I said. The moment the developer types, they'll know that there are these many options. Should I use a small one? Should I use a larger one? And those are fixed. You don't have to keep throwing sizes all around. And yeah, it feels like yours. It feels like a framework that you have customized it. It's your own component class. It always feels good when it's yours, right? So here's a quick summary. What did we discuss? The very first point was, if you can add it in HTML, you do it. Yes, it might look ugly, but that is what is going to be maintainable for you in the long run. And if you can do it in CSS, don't fight it. Don't think that the config file exists and everything should be in that one single file. You're actually struggling more than helping yourself. So add it in CSS if you feel it's easy. But when you're doing that, do remember to stick to just one procedure, whatever you choose. And then just because you can, don't change all the configuration that exists. A lot of people are used to that defaults. We shouldn't really spoil that developer experience. And finally, you should leverage the framework, create your own plugins, probably even make it open source. There is no SPACY for Tailwind, but yeah, you can explore the existing plugins also. Maybe use them if that's what you need for your project, or create new ones. There are amazing ones out there already. So that's about it. If you enjoyed my talk, I'm sure you love my YouTube channel as well. I have over 30 videos just for Tailwind CSS from 0 to hero, maybe. This is the QR code. You can check it out. And I do have some books. 2 years ago, I wrote a book on CSS, Flexbox, and Grid because I couldn't find a really good resource to really remember the Flex and Grid classes. Sorry, I'm saying classes because I'm talking about Tailwind, the properties. So this book is in both the versions, Vanilla CSS and Tailwind CSS. So if you want to learn Flex and Grid for Tailwind, you can go for that version. You can buy this or you can buy both. This talks to you in 70 different examples of where you can use the properties of flex and grid. So you learn the entire thing using real-world examples. Because the problem with flex and grid is when you read it, you understand what it does, but when you really have to do it yourself, you don't know how to center a div, right? That's what happens, but I hope this book solves it for you. Last year, I wrote another book, which is Level Up with Tailwindcss. So if you know the basics, but you're stuck there, you want to do more with it, you want to use it in a better way, there's a book, and it has a video course as well. So that's the link. If I launch more products, it will be in that as well. And the place to find me is Twitter or X. I don't like X, anyway. That's the place you can stalk me, you can follow. All the updates will be there. I do have a personal website, but it's not updated since years. Classic problem. I haven't done that, but Twitter is where I'm extremely active. You can find me there. And while you're here, I would say reach out to me. You can do all of those things later, but make the best of it. Reach out to all the speakers, talk to them. You might not feel that there's something to talk about, but it's okay. Just say hi. It's fine. You're here to network. You can do all the other stuff online, but this is the place where you can actually interact with the speakers, get to know them personally, and once you've spoken to somebody personally, there's that bond which is not the same as when you speak to them offline, right? So if you can't reach out to me, come to India. So March 23 and 24th is when LARACON India is happening. It's going to be a huge festival. Yes, the last LARACON was a festival. It was not a conference. So you experience the energy, experience the culture. I'd definitely love to see you there. Thank you.
You forgot to mention experience the spicy.
Yeah.
A lot of spicy stuff there. Yeah, impressive.
Questions?
Have questions.
Okay.
So one question from Steve is asking, when should I, instead of apply stuff on CSS, when I should apply, when I should do components?
Okay, most of the time, don't use apply at all. That's what Adam Wathan himself says. He's like, it's the biggest mistake I did of giving this feature. So try not to use that at all. Even components, if it's possible in your framework directly, like Laravel, you use Blade components rather than using Tailwind components. That is more maintainable. But if there is no other option, or like if you can build a plugin, if it's possible, there is only one variable in the example I showed, then it's okay. Otherwise, it's always best to create components in the framework than in Tailwind. Apply is the last thing you should. Last resort. It's like you don't have any other option when you use it.
Last resort. Okay. Yeah. And Adrian is asking, do I ever need to use important?
It's not important.
It's not important.
It's just an exclamatory mark. You can use it, but try not to. I would use important only if I'm overriding styles from another component library. Like, I had a discussion with Lisa the other day. She was saying it's so hard when you have other component, libraries with different styles, but your framework is using Tailwind. But if that is also using Tailwind, that's a different problem we'll solve. But try not to use important. It's same as CSS. In CSS also, you should avoid using it, similar to Tailwind.
Thank you.
Yeah, anonymous user.
Yeah, that guy. So the anonymous user is asking, is CSS a programming language?
Yes.
Here you have it.
Yes.
Welcome. Thank you. Big thank you to Shruti.